Hello Zero Books readers and viewers, it's me again, Douglas Lane, and in this video I'm going to take a break from my attempt to understand how we might transform the world capitalist system into socialism and take a more personal turn. Specifically, I'm going to consider the question of personal freedom as it relates to personal trauma. Along the way, I'll be examining the persona of the late Charles Grodin, referring to Theodor Adorno's 1950s study on the authoritarian personality, and reading an excerpt from the late Mark Fisher's book, Ghosts of My Life. Oh, and the essay will conclude with an excerpt from Christopher Lasch's book, The Minimal Self. This video will ask the question, why are we neurotic? Or to be more honest, we'll ask the question, why am I so neurotic? And is it possible that I might reason my way out of my emotional problems? When the actor Charles Grodin died last month, the obit in Variety began with the following line. Charles Grodin, best known for the neurotic comic wit he demonstrated in such films as The Heartbreak Kid, Heaven Can Wait, and Midnight Run, and for his role in the Beethoven movies, died Tuesday at his home in Connecticut. I think it's worth noting that the description of Grodin's talent includes an adjective that can be traced etymologically to what was once a term designating a psychological disorder. In a tribute for RogerEbert.com, the critic Dan Callahan noted that Grodin had a manner that matched the neuroticism and self-obsession of the 70s, or the me decade. The celebration of Grodin's persona points to a major change in our social norms.
Let's talk about your attitude, since it's reared its ugly head here now. You come on the show, and you've been coming on several years, and you seem reluctant to participate in a civilized exchange. I know that it's just a little attitude that you adopt for humorous purposes, and some people don't understand that, but why don't you clear it up for once and for all?
I don't adopt it for humorous purpose. I'm reacting to you.
No.
I think the person with the attitude problem is you.
No.
If you enjoy these videos, you should click on the subscribe button and click that bell. And you should also consider supporting us on Patreon. Patrons get access to our behind-the-scenes parrot room discussions, where we let our hair down, dish out gossip, or go into the weeds on topics such as the tendency of the rate of profit to decline, imperialism, and the critical theory of Bernard Morton Capel. You'll also get access to our podcasts on From Crisis to Communization, Reform and Revolution, and the history of the Russian Revolution, just as soon as I can coordinate times to record with Danny and or my kids. Your support makes videos like this one possible. Thanks for watching. Writing for the American Sociological Review in 1946, Harold W. Green outlined how and why the middle-class male child in America was particularly likely to suffer from a neurotic condition. Unlike a child born to immigrant factory workers or on a rural farm, the urban middle-class child was, according to Green, prone to have his personality absorbed by his parents, given his total emotional and physical dependence on mom and dad. While the child of immigrants or the child raised on a farm could be disciplined by work, he would also have siblings and other family and community members through which to form an identity. The middle-class child, by contrast, was born into a fragmented urban nuclear family defined by conflict and ambivalence. The father would inevitably be split between seeking to further his own individual success in his career and the responsibilities of family life. And he would find his family to be a drain on his resources. A drain on resources that could be put to more industrious use. The mother, on the other hand, would be left to herself to figure out how to run a household and raise a child, having been cut off from both the sort of rural domestic work that served the larger community and her own ambitions for individual success in the market. The child would run the risk of becoming a hypervigilant conformist, seeking to please these parents whose love for him always threatened to overwhelm him, tasked with either pleasing them or withstanding the withdrawal of their emotional support. He could neither avoid getting into trouble as he responded to their ambivalence and his own anxiety, nor fully express or develop his independence. The development of the neurotic as a comedian celebrity parallels the expansion of this urban middle-class life that became more and more culturally dominant as the 20th century rolled along, even amongst the working classes. We often think of the world as a product of the actions of individuals rather than thinking of the individuals as the product of the world. For instance, in 1950, Theodor Adorno, Elsie Frankel Brunswick, Daniel Levinson, and R. Nevitt Sanford published a study on the topic of the authoritarian personality. Collecting data from questionnaires and interviews, the study used a Freudian developmental model to evaluate participants and concluded that the authoritarian personality is a result of excessively harsh parents. However, many took issue with the methodology of the study, not least of which was Adorno himself. Adorno wrote that by analyzing the subjective experiences of individuals, the study failed to consider the objective conditions in society that set up the participants' subjective lives. He believed that the source of prejudice in individuals had to be sought in social factors because these were stronger, more powerful than the psyches of the individual participants. What I want to imagine is the predicament of the individual, of the psyche, once he or she realizes his or her weakness in relation to these social forces. In fact, what I'm currently facing is a realization that my own emotional life is not only dictated by forces that are stronger than my individual personality or psyche, but that these same forces set up the conditions necessary for a psyche or personality like mine to begin with. Many have noted that Freud's theories of the unconscious, of drives, of the id, the ego, and superego, far from referring to some innate characteristics of the human mind, are themselves products of historical change, and specifically, changes to the family and the community that surrounds it. Fixed stages of childhood, of development, can't easily be defended once one considers how variable childhood has been historically. For example, the idea that toys and games and play have always been the stuff of childhood, the notion that youth and imagination are conjoined, is discredited by the historical record. The history of balloons, for instance, demonstrates how expressions and objects of whimsy shifted from the adult world into the hands of children. The history of toys traces the history of the invention of the neurotic middle-class child and of childhood as a separate domain or an autonomous realm. The emphasis on generations, the idea that each generation is distinct from the one that came before, was reinforced by toys and games that were not lessons in adulthood, that were not educational, but rather were reflections of the fantasies and dreams that made up each successive generation's neurotic ideas, their own neurotic youth culture. But stepping back from my life, seeing H&R Pufnstuf, the Animaniacs, or Blue's Clues as repetitions of the same manufactured fantasy of separation, rebellion, and the promise of endless youth, doesn't do much to help me escape from my own nostalgic impulses. Just as stepping back from the conception of my fundamental self and recognizing how the models that define that self are historically determined doesn't help me overcome the natural feeling that my personality or self-conception is fixed and innate. In his book, Ghosts of My Life, Mark Fisher quoted Jacques Derrida's Spectres of Marx in order to justify choosing Melancholia over Mourning. That is, in order to justify holding on to a lost object or loved one indefinitely while refusing to reinvest in a life without him or her. Fisher embraces depression as a way to hold on to revolutionary ambition. If we understand our neurosis, our melancholia, as a reaction to the conditions of our upbringing, if we see our very conception of ourselves as a product of historical changes brought on by a system of exploitation that we long to overcome, we must doubt this depressive move, this propensity to hold on to ghosts. Instead, the task is to mourn the passing ghost, and invest in the fractured self, the conflicted ego that still defines us.
Paul Simon once said that your unflamboyant lifestyle is the clearest manifestation of a neuroses. Now, he's talking about your apartment there. Do you have any response to that?
Paul Simon is a kind of like a, like a party hat and a tutor guy, like, those things, you blow them out and they come back. He does that a lot. So to him, the way I live is, like not flamboyant enough.
In previous videos, I've claimed that the left needs to separate out politics from psychology. I've claimed that self-care, self-esteem, and overcoming trauma should not be the basis of our political work, but rather that expanding the realm of freedom should be the horizon that we aim for. But as I go through a personal trauma myself, I realize that freedom is difficult to accept, especially when in the process of obtaining it, you trade in your mostly operative neurotic defense mechanisms for pure anxiety and dread. Marx wrote that men make their own history, but they do not do it under self-selected circumstances. The same applies to our personalities, to our self-conceptions. I'm reminded that some interpreters of Hegel claim that at the end of the phenomenology of spirit, Hegel's description of the absolute is actually a description of forgiveness, a description of acceptance of the contradiction. I'll end this video there. Thanks for watching this Zero Books video. If you enjoyed it, subscribe to this channel and click on the notifications bell so that you'll be alerted whenever we release a new video. You should also consider supporting us on Patreon. Our patrons get access to our Inside Zero Books podcast every week and can get access to the Zero Books Book Club and help us to continue making online content from the left.